do it for you.
All right, yeah. Okay, so in the beginning, you claimed America's greatest country in the world. I just
Correct.
wanted to hear you say personally why you believe that to be true.
America is the greatest country in the history of the world. It's the most generous, most benevolent, most productive, most forward-thinking, most accepting, most entrepreneurial country ever to exist. We take in half the world's immigrants every year.
Okay.
I've seen Newsroom, so if you're going to have that moment in Newsroom where you issue all the stats and say, but we're behind in mathematics, and are you going to do that?
Well, according to the United Nations...
I've seen the show. Go ahead.
Well, the United Nations could give you about 17 reasons why we're not the greatest country in the world.
I've seen
according
Newsroom.
to their happiness report.
Right.
Okay, okay, that's really good. That's a great question.
How do you measure happiness, by the way?
But here's the question is...
I'm really happy.
Is greatness...
Well, our country does have pretty outrageous rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide. Is that not an indicator of an unhealthy country?
Is greatness defined by happiness? That's an interesting question. Well, first of all, when you take in half of the world's immigrants and you have aspirational, upward-thinking people, the word that first comes to happy when you think of it is, are you comfortable with where you are? When you have a country that is based on becoming better tomorrow than you are today, you're not comfortable with where you are.
Well, then why did we just lose another rank in the last year?
Let me finish.
Is that progress?
I didn't hear what you said.
What did he say?
Can you say
You mentioned striving for achievement. That's based... Well, we just lost another rank in the happiness report. Last year we were 17th, we're 18th now.
So again, here's how I define striving for achievement. How about, guys, how about most medical patents that have saved lives, most valuable companies, most entrepreneurs of consequence, the greatest capacity to strive to serve the needs and wants of other people and not asking for anything in return. 90 out of 100 of the most valuable companies in America are from America, which comprises 5% of the world's population.
I don't think those medical patents are doing much good for everyone who dies from...
How about polio? You think the polio vaccine helped the world?
I think opioids probably kill more people than polio, so that's a little bit more on my radar.
What is?
The opioid crisis. Have you heard of it?
You think the opioid crisis is a solely American phenomenon?
No, but...
And by the way, I do have a question. Could you name a country that's better than America, that's greater than our country?
I could probably name about 17 right here.
Because the United Nations... Hold on.
Well, then...
Let me say this. Let me say, I think you conflating.
Are you planning on leaving?
What's up?
Are you planning on leaving?
Yeah, here shortly.
Yeah, right. So I think you're conflating two things.
Bon voyage.
You're conflating two things, right? The country being great and people not appreciating it. That's two different things. This is the greatest country on planet Earth.
Sure, if you value money.
And whether and this is what I have to say to respond to that. Whether you're happy or not is based on your feelings. Because I'm happy. I don't want to live anywhere else, and I will never live anywhere else. And that and nobody can judge that, put that on a piece of paper, because nobody ever interviewed me about how happy I am. So I don't care about those silly tests and all these numbers that people put together. There's nowhere else in the world that you would want to live. And you say you do, but the reason that you're still here is because it's the greatest country. There's nowhere in the world you can be free. There's nowhere in the world you can be as proud. There's nobody in the world that can kick our butt militarily. So you feel free to go anywhere you want to go, but you'll be back to America, I promise. And this is one of the only countries where you can say what you're saying and say it's not the greatest and you not go to jail.
I'm not saying I don't believe it's the greatest country. Not anymore.
That's fine.
But, I mean, I'm not saying it's a shitty country. It's a good place to be. Like, it's a great country.
Happiness, just so you know, is an impossible metric to measure. It's absurd
I
to
disagree.
me. It's absurd to me that they're saying they're doing surveys on happiness.
I mean, I'm a psychology major.
If I went around the world,
good at yeah.
Oh,
like,
then you know. I guess you know.
Yeah,
Never mind.
I'm pretty familiar.
I guess
with
you
how
know
these
how
things
happy I am. because you are a psychology major.
I'm pretty familiar with how easy it is
I
to
love
measure
these sorts of arguments. I
happiness.
majored in psychology, therefore I know how happy you are and how it can be defined.
You
What a bizarre
specifically
thing to
know,
say.
but I'm just saying.
It's an impossible metric.
Your claim is that
the way
happiness is
people define
difficult to
happiness
measure,
is different
and
from
I'm saying
person to
that's-
person. It is different from person to person. Some people define happiness in terms of how much success they have in their job. Some people define happiness by how much family time they can create. Some people define happiness by being alone and sitting alone with their cat. That's me, okay? Like, there's all different types of ways to measure happiness, so it's bizarre to me to think that they've created some mass survey at the United Nations that determines how happy we are in a nation. I have to say, I'm pretty happy too. I think the people in this room would agree that we love America, and I appreciate your psychology degree you're working on.
Do you know that America takes in half of the world's immigrants every single year? You know, it's really amazing about our culture and our identity. We're one of the only countries ever to exist, actually the only country ever to exist, where it doesn't matter where you come from or what you look like or even what religion that you practice. When you come here, you're called an American. It's not the same in European countries, these countries with higher happiness index. If you come from somewhere else and you go to Sweden, they'll say, no, that's somebody else. Our Swedish identity is being here for hundreds and hundreds of years. Do you know that Americans voluntarily gave away $500 billion to charity last year? When there's a natural disaster, when there's conflict, you don't call the Belgians, you call the Americans. When the communists were on the march in the Korean Peninsula, when the world was war-weary, it was our boys from Missouri and Iowa and Minnesota that went halfway across the world. 30,000 Americans died so that South Korea could exist today to push back the communists. And we did not ask for any land in return. You know the only land we asked for was a land to bury our dead. No other country has voluntarily sent hundreds of thousands of their own citizens to die for the freedoms of others. No other country has taken in half of the world's immigrants and still be called bigoted and sexist and racist. No other country has had 90 out of 100 of the most productive companies with 5% of the world's population. And there's a reason why there's a waiting list that is double the size of our population to get into here. It's because we have a unique identity, and that identity is built on ideas. The idea of acceptance, tolerance, freedom, liberty, that you can have these conversations without the suppression of others. Thank you for your question. Thank you.
We have to take the next question, but I will say that I always genuinely feel so sad when people say they don't think this country is great, because if there's one thing, I used to have that mentality, and it's sad. It really is sad, and it's lonely, and I'm sure he would disagree because he's majoring in psychology. But what Trump has gifted the world with, and especially me in my life, is this sense of patriotism, because there is nothing that makes you feel more united or happier or finally feeling like you've transcended against all the nonsense of identity politics and racism and sexism and feeling like you're a part of something than feeling love for your country. I just wanted to say that. Like, loving America is the best feeling in the world, and I hope he changes his mind one day.